Don't record to the
Okay.
perfect. Cool. Yeah. So, rapid fire. We all know how slow I am at rapid fire Fridays, so bear with us. We're gonna try to answer 5 questions that came from you guys,
Woo!
and maybe we'll start with kind of a softball pitch of
Softball.
a
All right.
question. Um, I like this one. How do I improve my downhill running?
Practice. Um, so especially, and I think it's kind of different, like when you're thinking about like technical downhill running versus pure downhill running or like road running. So to start with that, like kind of some of the things I like athletes to think about are eccentric muscle development. So if you're going to be doing a race or an event with a lot of downhill and you are concerned about it, a great way to prepare is by doing that mountain legs routine, particularly the backward stepping lunges, because, and I would actually, depend if you have like a lot of vert and you're not feeling particularly prepared, doing backwards lunges with a weight helps fire up the same muscles that you're using when you run downhill because you're lengthening the muscle under load. And that's what's happening when you run downhill. And that is why your legs feel totally destroyed after hammering downhills. Um, so doing a little bit of that's one place where I see strength training being particularly effective in an athlete's regimen is preparing for intense downhills.
Yep.
Another thing I like athletes to think of are short strides, high turnover, and keeping your legs under you. You don't want to be in the back seat too much because then you're putting additional pressure on your knees and quads. Like if you're leaning back and you're braking too much, sometimes you kind of want to push the speed envelope a bit because if you're like really trying to prevent yourself from gaining too much momentum, you could end up just hurting yourself even more.
Yeah.
TJ is like a really great downhiller. I'd love to know what your strategies are for downhill technical running.
I think the kind of the eccentric muscle contractions and all of those things with the backward stepping lunges is a good place to start. But what I have my athletes focus on is that turnover and kind of getting faster with your leg speed. The thing is about downhilling, you have a lot of gravity on your side. So you're either braking or you're kind of leaning down the hill and taking all of that momentum with you. In order to use all that gravity has to offer, you have to be able to make a lot of steps on the downhill, particularly if the terrain is technical. Um, so, in order to do that, a lot of fast rides are really helpful in training. Those can be done on the flats, longer intervals of like 1 minute, maybe even to 2 minutes to reinforce the leg speed and the turnover. That stuff is going to be really, really important. Um, what's really nice about downhill running, the gravity effect, is that you should be able to move at a faster rate while keeping a lower heart rate. But in order to really enjoy the benefits of that, it's got to be second nature for you to have that leg speed. So we reinforce that stuff on the flats first. And this stuff doesn't take, a few months to get better. It'll get better usually for a lot of people over the course of a season, like a year, or like a summer, where in the beginning of the summer, you'll be feeling pretty good on the downhills after doing some speed work in the winter. And then by the end of the summer and fall, you'll really be used to leaning down the hill and letting the legs flow automatically and kicking them up and allowing them to turn over, turn over, turn over. Um, something that I think is particularly important with a lot of the races that we have in the states is they're not that technical. So a lot of those downhill segments are on relatively smooth trail, so you can really fly if you've got that turnover. Turnover is one of the most important things. It's going to help us on our climbing too.
Question from Chrissy, but I'll ask TJ. Is there any risk on going too hard on downhills on training runs, especially on pavement?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of risks because when you go downhill, you're raising the impact forces because you're farther away from the ground. So, think about that in the reverse. When we climb and we do a lot of hill strides to gain strength and power in our training, we're also reducing injury risk because we're much closer to the ground. So there's less travel between where your foot is coming down and then where it's striking.
Even though output levels are similar.
Correct. when you switch that grade, say you're doing your hill work on a 6%
Same
uphill
output,
grade.
higher impact.
Yeah, and then you go to a downhill grade, you have that much more impact forces, right?
So
Very, very important to think about that.
you'll notice, like, or my athletes at least will notice that in a few runs, not close to events, I'll cue them to take the downhills with a little more intention, or I'll say, take the downhills like a boss, or push on downhills. We don't do that in every training run, because if you, like, 2 weeks before your A race, go out and just hammer a downhill, you're incurring a lot more muscle damage than is conducive to good training in progression. And the more your running progresses, the more, like, that pushing on downhills kind of becomes playing with fire, and you want to reel it in, and not, like, always go all out on, I mean, you should never go all out on, any terrain, but the more advanced you get, the more you just have to be careful and, like, really moderate your efforts on downhill.
I would say, especially on pavement, if the surface is harder, desert running would probably fall under this too, because of all the slick rock. You really want to reduce those output levels. Just because gravity is taking you and you can run faster doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you because of that muscle damage. So if you're running on a Tuesday and you've got 4 more days of training ahead of you, you better be ready to, excuse me, to be really sore for the rest of the week if you pound those downhills on a Tuesday run. So at least for me and for a lot of my athletes, I try to have people reserve the faster efforts for a Saturday where there's more acute stress on that particular day. And then we can follow that up with a more recovery style run on a Sunday. That can be very beneficial. You really want to be careful with that kind of stuff, which is also doesn't take many sessions to get your legs accustomed to the eccentric muscle contractions and all of that weight, and that load bearing force. So a few focused sessions over the course of a training block while preparing for a specific mountain race can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I'll have my athletes once again either do, like, a focused long run where the intent is to take downhills with purpose, or like a boss, or I'll, for, like, more mountainous races, I'll integrate, like, during hill workouts, I'll have them do realistic rundowns. Instead of a recovery rundown, I'll have them push on the rundown to help simulate that same muscular breakdown that you'll incur during a race. It's like, for pushing on downhills, you don't want to never do it because then you'll be underprepared, but you don't want to do it all the time because then you'll just be broken.
Yeah, you'll be really sore. That's especially the faster you get. The easier it is to run fast downhill, the easier it is for you to incur a lot of muscle damaging impact forces on your body. So you have to pull back even more. That's something that we talk about all the time when we go out on our long runs. Okay, we got to reduce those output levels on the downs, even though that they come easily.
Different output levels. Like, sometimes, we'll be able to, I'll keep up just fine on the uphills. When we hit the downhills, I'm like, all right, TJ, see you at the junction. Not trying to race you on this scree field.
All right, I think we nailed that one. So let's move on. Should we do a tougher question?
Yeah,
or should we do another softball?
Up to you. I'm ready for whatever.
All right, cool. How do I start building self-belief and self-compassion?
So the answer is actually the same to getting good at downhill running. It's practice and training. I think that people like to think that self-belief or self-compassion come naturally, and like everything else, it's totally a skill that we can hone through training, right? The way I like to think about it is that life gives me a lot of opportunities to practice self-compassion. I make so many mistakes every single day, and a really big part of my brain wants to be hard on me, but a much larger part of my brain understands that being excessively self-critical is actually counterproductive. I think a lot of people who particularly are drawn to endurance sports like have maybe an overdeveloped part of their brain that's really good at being hard on them, right? Like, because to finish any race, much less like an ultra, you have to have that part of your brain that's like really good at pushing, like past the part of comfort, past the part of like maybe warm fuzzies. But in normal life, we need to be able to turn that part of our brain off, or at least talk it down. So for me, like whenever I mess up during a workout, instead of being like really overly critical and being like, you did bad, you did a bad job, you're a bad runner, you're never going to get better, you're not as good as you think you are. You're a fraud. Everyone knows you're an imposter. Like, don't even put this on Strava because people are just gonna, like, if there was a thumbs down button, that thing would be getting pounded. Like, you have to be able to say, like, failure is part of this process. I grow through failure. Like, every workout is an opportunity to say, like, this probably could have gone better, but it went the way it did, and I learned from it regardless. Like, I grew from it regardless. And because I finished it, like, that makes me better. Or, like, you know, if I bagged it, or like it didn't go the way I wanted, then it's an opportunity to say, like, this was hard for a reason. I wouldn't grow if it was easy. If this was going to happen every single time, then there would be no point in trying, right? Like, if you knew what the outcome was going to be, then we wouldn't try. And just use that as an opportunity for self-compassion. Or I think what's really hard for me is, like, I put a lot of stress on myself to be ultra productive in both training and work. And at the end of almost every day, I'm like, I didn't coach as many people as I wanted. I didn't write as much as I wanted. You know, I didn't do as good, like, for trail runners I wanted to do. And just saying, like, hey, like, beating yourself up over it will not motivate you to do better next time. What will motivate you to do better is saying, I accept what happened today, and I'm going to go forward tomorrow, with additional self-compassion and maybe, like, lessons from, like, what went well, what didn't, but not being overly emotional and, like, you know, using different, like, productivity metrics as, like, a tool of self-judgment.
Yeah, that's great. I hear a lot in what you say, Zoe, about acceptance. And I think, in order to help build some of this stuff, that acceptance is, sorry, I've been on a lot of calls this week and losing my voice constantly. It's really important that we think about these things in those terms. I really like that. We wrote a blog post on how to use mindfulness in training, and I think that is a really appropriate blog to answer this question. We can start to move on from moments where we didn't feel like we did as well as we could in a more productive way by taking the things that we're learning in those moments forward and actively trying to, without too much judgment, leave behind kind of that critical inner self-talk and things like that, those thoughts that aren't productive to helping us move forward. Every workout, whether it's a workout that felt hard, a workout where you screwed up, a workout where you only got 20 minutes in because you had a busy day, those are all workouts that help you move forward regardless of whether or not you executed 100%. Something that I think is important to realize is that there's almost never going to be a perfect run. There's never going to be a perfect workout. Every workout should hurt. Even if you're on one day and you're flowing, those 5x30, second hills or 5x3 minute hills or whatever you're doing in your training, they're going to hurt. They're supposed to hurt. That's how you grow. So judging yourself in that moment and saying, these are hurting. Why am I not fit enough?
That has never once made anyone faster.
Right. But what it can do is when you finish that routine, you reinforce, yes, I crushed that. I got through that hard, workout. I got through that tough moment. Anytime that happens to you during your day, you should make a mental check mark on that, because that's how you start to develop that self-belief library that we talk about. Those moments where you dealt with some adversity or a challenging situation, you can look back on it. And then when you're in another tough moment, you can be like, hey, I did those hard things before, so why can't I do it now? And the more experience you have where you're consciously there and present in those moments, working through those hard things and making that mental check mark to yourself, then in those future moments where things get tough, you can say, hey, I did that. That's how you develop self-belief. It's through experience, through practice, through training, just like Zoe mentioned. And it's through, in these moments of self-compassion and giving yourself grace too. I would definitely, read the blog post on how to move on after a bad day. There's some exercises in there that are really important. Control the things that you can control, leave the rest. The more often you practice that, the better at it you get, and the less time you'll spend inside your own head beating yourself up for not executing a workout perfectly, And the more time you're going to spend, building the self-belief library, in that moment where you're actually present and saying, hey, I screwed up one interval, but it happens. Look at all 5 other intervals that I did, and they were hard, but I worked through it. And that just means that, like, I'm building, and I'm also building this self-belief at the same time. I'm working through challenging situations, and it can happen in relationships, any part of your life. It doesn't have to be in training. Like, we're all very lucky that we train and engage in something like this every single day, because it gives us these very acute examples of how we're continuing to build ourselves up. Not everybody gets to experience that. So we're all really fortunate to have those moments. Use them to your advantage and translate them back into your life when you're in a tough situation at work, or you're dealing with a challenging person in your life, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I always like to think about like the way that I would like hype up like particularly other women that I look up to. Like I think specifically about like Kylie and Kristen, both women that I work with on multiple levels, in the way that like if I went into a meeting and I was like, you've got to freaking hire Kylie, like you've got to hire Kristen, like you are not going to find a more passionate, dedicated person. You're not going to find a smarter, harder worker. And like try to be that person for myself as well, in the same way that I try to do it for other women. And I think about like I have routines, like not just for my running, but like also for my work life. Some of them are more relevant in a pre-COVID era, but like I have playlists that I listen to whenever I'm going to go, like before I go into a meeting where I'm going to have to like advocate for myself. I have like a lucky bright purple blazer that I wear that's like my like business lady armor whenever I'm going to have to like go into a meeting and not, be Coach Zoe, but be like, I need money for my podcast, Zoe, or like, I need more money for my freelance budget, Zoe, or like, you should fund my passion project, Zoe. And I like
awesome.
listen to Beyonce, I put on my purple blazer and I'm ready to like be that person. I think it, works a lot. It works similarly for trail running minus the blazer.
Nice
Like you
priming
hype up
routine.
yourself. Exactly. Like that's what it is I'm like, hey, like you got to like own this, even if it doesn't feel 100% authentic in the moment. Try to find things that like can cue my brain into like believing that I am the person I want to be.
Yeah, and that's how you get to that
And that's how you get there.
place
It's like
before you
finding
know it.
ways to bridge that gap, because I'm like not always like power purple blazer Zoe, but getting there.
Sometimes you have to manufacture
You got to
it.
manufacture it. Fake it till you make it.
Make it till you make it.
Make it till you make it.
All right. I think that segues really well into another, at least I think this is a tough question. I'm injured and I need some extra downtime. What can I do to help cope with the loss of running in my life?
So something my mental coach, Addie Bracey, had me do when I was struggling with injury, she had me draw a pie chart of my identity and fill in like all the little parts. And I would really encourage everyone to do this, because I think it can be so, so helpful. Like it was a really good exercise for me to be a little, to be self-critical about different ways I perceive of my identity. But make a pie chart and fill in like all the parts of yourself and like what percentage you feel like they make up. Athlete, partner, parent, coach, podcaster, dancer, vegan chef, TV watcher, amateur cereal eater, like whatever like resonates with you. Figure out how much of a part of yourself those things are. And I think a lot of us would maybe be surprised by how big a piece of that pie chart being an athlete makes up. Another thing that I think of is we really love the TV show Ted Lasso. And there's this amazing scene where the star player is kind of aging out of being an athlete. He's getting old. And so his girlfriend asks his niece, like, what do you think about when you think about Uncle Roy? And she thinks he's really smart, he swears a lot, and he buys me ice cream, and I love him. And like none of it had to do with him being an athlete. So use it as a moment to maybe like reconnect with the parts of yourself that aren't purely rooted in being an athlete, even though it's okay for like athletics to mean a lot to you and to take up a large part of your life. Like they definitely do for me. And I know when I was injured this summer, I struggled in a huge way that I did not expect when I could not run. That was super hard. And it, there's no way around the hardness, but I think leaning into it and using it as an opportunity for curiosity, like, are there maybe ways in which athletics is like, what's, check in on that relationship? Is it taking up too much time from other things? Could it maybe was it not taking up enough space? Was I not like curious enough about like different cross training or like PT things, like self-care parts of athletics that maybe could have been helpful. And then using that time to retune into other parts of your identity that are just as important, that are maybe neglected. Then I think, also just getting curious about like other ways to connect with joy and movement outside of running. Like for me, I really love cycling. So injury can be a fun time for cycling. I have athletes who are taking swim, like adult women taking swim lessons. This is amazing.
So
Like
cool.
you're not just a runner. You are, if you are on this call, if you are on our team, you are an athlete and you should treat yourself like an athlete in all things. And, try new stuff. Like I learned to ski as an adult and it is one of the most challenging, humiliating experiences of my life, but also super rewarding. You are an athlete and you can do all these amazing things, like try out swimming. Like, I don't know, if you stream like a fun hip hop dance, low impact dance class, like find new ways to engage with movement in a way that feels right for you and helps you embrace your athletic self without overemphasizing the running portion of that. Because when I think of like all the amazing people on our team, like, yes, I do think of them as athletes, but I'm always like, oh man, like this person kicks butt in the ICU and then shows up in their training, or like this mom just like freaking owns motherhood and like also shows up in her training, or like this dad, such a good partner, and he shows up in his training and he's like there for his like sales team. Like we all have a lot of intersecting identities, and at the risk of not giving enough practical advice around this question, just like own all the parts of you that make you you. And injury can be a really shitty time to reinvestigate those things, but it can be good. It can be like generative. I'm not saying it's easy or like fun to do these things, but it is really necessary and important and can be a huge opportunity for growth.
Yeah, and in terms of opportunity for growth, a lot of breakthroughs in running happen post injury, because even though we've stretched ourselves to that point where something happens and we have to take a step back, often, that extra rest is going to allow us to make bigger gains in the future, because our system, musculoskeletal, aerobic, adrenal, all these different hormonal, all these different parts of us actually get this downtime that we hadn't had because of the consistent training before that. You can end up with a massive breakthrough that happened to Zoe this summer. It's happened to a number of athletes.
The worst training block of my life. Like, I had to take 2 weeks. Like I took 1 week totally off, 1 week cycling, a bunch of weeks at like 15, 20 miles a week. And then that's like that basically a reset on the cellular level allowed me to set an FKT and like win a check on a podium, which I had never done before. And that was just because I was able to like truly rest, even though I hated it more than I've ever hated like anything ever.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. It was like a clear and direct cause of like a level up in my training and in my racing performance.
Yeah.
Even though I was not a super pleasant person to be around for a couple days.
It's an inevitable part of the process, and I think that everybody works through it in different ways.
TJ is a master at like, he just is like awesome. More time to play guitar and like watch Game of Thrones, and just is a zen master of injury.
Fortunately, I haven't had a lot of injuries, but they might be coming. I've been dealing with a number of small things over the last like 4 months that threaten to derail me all the time, which is the uncertainty can be tough. You have to keep at all of the little things, make sure you're maintaining every single day.
Food, sleep being
eat a
the,
lot.
the foundation of that like self-care pyramid, eating enough, sleeping enough, and then like the like more like the sexier like foam rolling, PT, a little bit of strength training.
Ooh, I'm making notes for next week. Yeah, I think you did a really great job with that answer, Zoe. I completely agree. I love the part about connecting with other aspects of yourself. We're all multifaceted humans. We're not just athletes, even if being an athlete is a large part of that pie.
Which is okay. Like whatever part of the pie it takes up is great and wonderful and valid. But I think the problem is whenever we don't ask enough questions about like the why does it take up this amount of space?
Yeah. So I want to finish the call with one more question. It's, I think, another broader topic, but it does relate to the last couple of things that we talked about. And this is a question that somebody asked through the surveys that we did at the end of the summer. And it was one that stuck out to me because I think it's super important. And it's, can training help me improve in other areas of my life?
Ooh, I feel like you have a great answer for this.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if it's going to be a great answer, but I have an answer
I
for
think you
it.
have an answer for it.
The obvious answer to me is yes, of course it can. I think, we've talked about using training as a mechanism or a vehicle for building self-belief, for building self-compassion, for giving ourselves more grace. These things translate into life, right? I think, at least for me, this is why I named this coaching business Microcosm, because running is a microcosm for life. There are countless examples every day in training and in adventuring and racing, um, where we get these acute moments that we can later use to help us in other areas of our life. I think particularly when we're dealing with things of an athletic nature that test our mental and physical limits and capabilities, we often feel really empowered after getting through like a big challenge. And that empowerment can lead to successes in other areas of our lives, whether it's like a career, having the courage to make a career move, or to step things up a level in a relationship, or to go for something financially that maybe you didn't think you're capable of before. There can be, many kind of ways in which that manifests itself into your life. But for me, some things that like I think are really helpful and I've been able to improve on is like having faith, being better in uncertainty, having more patience. There's nothing like training and the process of this stuff to develop more patience. The numbers, everybody wants to talk about numbers and data. I know everybody's motivated by that, but the hard facts of running are the numbers don't move that much over a few weeks or months. The numbers start to move over a few years. That those are the facts. Numbers aren't that movable. But what is movable is how learn to be more patient in that process. How you learn to be more of a master, to take a mastery approach to the running, which is something that we're really big on talking about, but translates to life too. Like, how am I going to be a great partner? Well, it takes time. It's not about being the best partner today. It's about being a better partner and making improvements over time. Or how do I get better in any number of things? Like as a coach, it's not about being the best coach today. It's about being present in my coaching today so that each small step leads to me being a better coach in the future. So I think that there are, at least for me, this is very personal, but countless examples of how, training can help you improve, right? Because everything that we do here often is provides a very acute example of something that we can use in the real world.
Yeah, I think for me, it really helps grow my capacity for self compassion and self confidence. Like, there's nothing worse than someone who lacks confidence and is also very hard on themselves. It's like a pretty deadly combo. And just like, once again, like having running is an amazing opportunity to forgive myself like every single day. Like, oh, yep, that workout didn't go the way I wanted, but that's okay. I'm trying to grow. And so missteps are inevitable. I accept myself and I forgive myself. Like, I can do that the same way. Like, every time I put out a podcast and I'm like, oh, that wasn't quite what I wanted. And I'm like, you know what? You went as hard as you could and it has to be over eventually. And you did good. And what matters isn't putting out the best podcast every time. It's like over years and years and years putting stuff out that's pretty good, and like just growing your body of work and like forgiving yourself and like trying to channel like the person who is like, when I think like about my most empowered moments, it's like in races where I'm like jamming to my playlist and like I've got TJ supporting me with like Coke and I feel good and I feel powerful, and like trying to channel that person at work, because like it's easier for me to run a marathon than it is to like speak up in Zoom meetings sometimes, and trying to like be that person who's like, you know what? Yeah, I can like stand on the podium. I can speak up in meetings, and like I can advocate for myself and my team and like my freelancers, and I can advocate for my own creative work. And like seeing how those like things are connected, and like basically just using running as an opportunity to have a low stakes way to experience the areas of life growth that I most want to work on.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it can't be, overstated the importance of building self-belief through this process. Those things are movable. They're movable very quickly, a lot faster than the numbers are able to move. And if we don't take the time to think about that stuff, and you don't want to overthink it, but to be aware of it in the process, we lose out on a lot of the benefits of the training. We do see so many more like life breakthroughs in coaching
Mm-hmm.
than we see in running breakthroughs. And that's because I think the daily act of engaging in this stuff, that translates right through into
Yeah.
life
I
so
think that's
much
like
quicker.
the most exciting part of being a coach is when you see someone who's like, you know what? Like I stood up for myself in a meeting today, or like, you know what? Like I threw out my scale because I know how to not judge myself. Like I know how to accept myself. I know what information is important, and like how much gravity is exerted upon me is not an important data point. Or like, you know what? I'm learning how to like love myself. I'm learning how to like be aggressive in my self-care. I'm learning how to speak up for myself in my partnership or in my like parenthood. And that's the stuff where I'm just like, this is amazing. Like there is no workout that makes me feel like a better coach than when I'm like, yeah, this person like took a day off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something that also comes to mind for me is just being comfortable knowing that your best is always good enough, even if you fall short of your expectations for yourself or the expectations that you think other people might have for you. Every day you have an opportunity to do your best. Your best is going to change every day based on hundreds of variables. Like, did I sleep well? Was yesterday stressful? Am I tired from a workout? Am I tired from a tough day at work? Like, am I feeling uncertain because of a global pandemic or an argument I had with, a partner or a friend? There's so many things that can limit our maybe our potential in any given moment. But we can become more aware of that stuff and more accepting of the fact that, as human beings, you know, our potential is infinite, but in each moment might be a little bit limited by the circumstances we have or environmental stress and whatnot. And that is okay and part of the process. And something that I just really like about training that I feel I'm able to constantly improve is my ability to accept that my best just changes from day to day. And if one day I'm running 9-minute pace because that's what feels easy, that's amazing. And it doesn't matter if the day before 7-minute pace felt easy. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is I got out there. That was my best. I reinforced that to myself through some positive affirmations, maybe during the effort or afterwards. And I solidify that. And then, I take what I need to and I move forward. To me, that's how I kind of go about my life, and it's maybe a bit more mindful, or mindful maybe, or something like that than others. And everybody can develop their own way of doing that stuff, which is so cool. Training gives us that opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, cool. Maybe we will leave it with that.
Yeah.
We did have a couple other questions, but we'll get to
It's
them next
always,
week.
yeah,
There's always another call.
always another call.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. We hope you all have a nice weekend. You get outside, enjoy the fresh air. Try to please stay safe. We've had a number of athletes test positive to COVID this week. So
Wash your
please
hands,
wash your hands,
wear a
wear a
mask,
mask, be, be smart community members, respect everybody. It's just so important right now.
respect your lungs and other people's lungs.
And if you're feeling a little bit sick, now is not the time to take big training risks.
Yeah.
It's okay to take a step back.
That's 2021. 2020 is not about big training risks.
We were thinking 2021 was going to be the year, but we'll look for 2021 second half.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. It's going to be great.
2020 round 2.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you all. Have a good weekend.
Bye. Thanks, TJ.